Hi, today we are going to show you how we build our vertical trellises. It's pretty simple and straightforward. We'll walk you through what materials you need, how to put it together and assemble it, and also how to install it into the ground. And we like to use them to grow our peas and beans and tomatoes, and we have a really successful passion fruit growing on one of the trellises. They're really great and versatile. You can make them various sizes based on the space that you have and the materials that you are able to acquire. However, the ones that we'll be showing today end up being about 8 feet tall before you put them in the ground and 67 inches wide. Again, you can alter this. This is just a basic plan. Please comment, like, and subscribe to this video and our channel. We really appreciate all the support, and we hope you enjoy learning how to build a trellis. Let's go. Okay, so we're gonna go over our supplies right now. Kind of laid everything out so you can see it. Here we have these are 2-inch by 2-inch redwood poles, or boards, or whatever you want to call it. And last time I made these, I could only get cedar. This time I was able to get redwood. It kind of just depended on what the hardware store had available. These, I believe, started out at 8 feet. You can see the two longest ones. That is the original height, and we started off with 5, and I've pre-cut everything because, as I said in the garden bed video, which is linked above, Home Depot will not do trim cuts, which means it has to be greater than 12 inches. So we needed a couple other things too, so we actually rented a U-Haul truck and bought the full size without getting a cut there, and I just cut it here. I believe you can actually fit these in. We have a hatchback 4-door that's on the smaller side, and I think if I put all the seats down, I can fit these too. So if you do have a smaller car, you can get it done. So I cut, so there's 2, and those are going to be the sides. These 3 middle ones, there is a slight height difference, but they're going to be the top and then the middle supports. And then these are what's left over, and they were actually longer, but I cut each one in half, and we're going to use them to provide extra support at the corners where we have a vertical and a horizontal one meet. If you're cutting things, you're going to need some kind of saw. We only have a reciprocator saw, but you could totally do this with a hand saw. It would just take a little bit of extra work. Or if you have a circular saw, that would be even better. But because of this, you obviously want to make your cuts as clean as possible, but the reciprocating saw works good enough as long as you're measuring properly. Speaking of that, you'll want a tape measure, okay, and something to mark it with. And then for fastening, you're going to need some kind of deck screw. I've got these 2.5, 1 pound, and then you're going to want cabinet screws with the wide edge here, and that's because that's what you're going to use to hold the remesh, so you really need the wide head. Both of these have star bits, and these happen to come with it, but you want to make sure if you're getting it that it either comes with the bit you need or you have it already. You'll need a drill, and then these bolt cutters. These are the only thing we have that'll cut the remesh. This is a little overkill, but I'm sure there's something that's smaller that would cut it too. And then you'll want 2 T-posts to put it in the ground, and this is called remesh. It does rust or oxidize, but because it's not stainless steel. If you wanted it to not oxidize at all, you could get cattle fencing. That's more heavy duty. So you'd need a different fastener to get it on the wood, and also it comes in 12-foot panels, which are way too big to have on the top of my car. I did that once, and it was a very harrowing experience.
but we are going to trim these down, and there's two of them here. They're stacked on top. So let's get started.
We'll start by attaching the top bar with it is measured 67 inches to the two side poles that are 8 feet each. And we will put one deck screw in through each, connecting them as you see here. And then right now I'm measuring 45 inches from the top to place the middle support beam. And that is going to be one of the two 64-inch measured beams and one more deck screw in on each side. And then we will measure 84 inches from the top to place the bottom one. And again, that's another 64-inch beam and one deck screw in on each side. And you will have some wood poking out at the bottom there, and that is what is going to be partially buried into the ground when we install the trellis into our garden bed. And we'll get to that part later. Now I'm laying out the 6 extra support beams that we cut from our leftovers, and we're going to put one deck screw in per side, joining it like a triangle, so we get nice extra support there. It really makes a difference, especially where we live, because we get a lot of wind during certain times of the year, so we want to make sure we reinforce it. Again, these are just cut from the leftover from when we made our cuts of into the 67 and the 264-inch beams, and you can angle them as much as you want. If you have extra wood, you could even do different lengths on them as well. One note: the kneeling pad I'm using, we recently redid our backyard with gravel to make it more drought tolerant instead of grass. And so the kneeling pad is definitely a necessity. It's a great one. It's extra thick. I'll put a link into the description below, so you can check it out if you'd like. But I love it. It's very handy. By the way, I put links to most of the tools I used today in this video in the description below if you're interested in where to get them. Okay, we are going to flip the trellis over so that we have the front facing up now. And after that, we will lay down the first remesh sheet, and we are going to switch over to using the wide head cabinet screws to help secure the remesh to the frame of the trellis. If for some reason you can't find the wide head cabinet screws, you could totally attach this with a bunch of zip ties, but the screws hold it really well.
Okay, so now we are going to install the remesh, and as you can see, it's overlapping. We'll trim that after we get it installed. Again, we're going to switch over to the cabinet screws, and you can see they have kind of a wide head, and we're going to use that to pin down that. One thing, you want to line it up as best you can. It is kind of flexible, so as you start putting down the fasteners, it'll flatten out and tighten up a little bit. So if it looks a little off when you're first laying it down, that's okay. And I like to do top 2 corners, then bottom 2 corners, and then go from there. I do one in the center and one on either side. Here you can see we've got our remesh lined up, and we've got our cabinet screw in the corner, and we are going to drill it down so that the wide head pinches either part of the corner of the remesh to hold it to the frame. You can see there where I'm pointing, it's going to secure that well, and we'll do that to every corner. After doing the first corner, we are now going to do the other 3 corners, and as I alluded to earlier, the remesh will start to lay more flat as you continue to put in more cabinet screws. And again, this step especially is really helpful to have a second hand, but obviously it's just me for this one, so you can totally make it work. It does get offline easily, so that's why the second set of hands is very helpful. And after anchoring the four corners, I will do one or two on the three sides of each part. The middle beam, the remesh does not quite reach it. The other one will, and it will overlap there. So we're not going to put any on that one. Um, at least it doesn't reach it on this size trellis, but if you change the size, then it might. And again, you just want to make sure that the cabinet head screws are just pinching the remesh to the frame really well so that they don't come off. After fully securing the first remesh sheet, we are going to grab our bolt cutters and cut off the overhanging piece. If you don't know what bolt cutters are, they are very heavy duty clippers of sorts that you can literally cut off locks and bolts, hence the name. As I stated earlier, this one is probably a little overkill, but it's what I have to cut that. We do have a smaller tin set of tin snips, and they do not cut the remesh, so we use the bolt cutters. Now we are placing and lining up our second remesh sheet, and like I said earlier, this one will cover the gap that was left from the first one and be on the middle support beam and go all the way to the bottom perfectly, at least in our size trellis that we're building today. And again, you're going to want to use the same pattern for the cabinet screws. Start with the four corners of the remesh and then start reinforcing on the sides and the middles of the tops and bottoms. And again, if you prefer, you could use a couple more cabinet screws to help secure it. That's up to you. And then after that, we are going to cut off the extra again with our bolt cutters. Um, and when we eventually do figure out how we're going to use the extra remesh, we'll certainly put together a video to show you on that one. I forgot to mention earlier the wide head cabinet screws and the deck screws are available at your local hardware store. I got mine at Home Depot. Um, and just you want to look for the measurements that I included in the description below the video. All right, so we're cutting off our last extra remesh, and then we will be done assembling it, and it is ready to install into our garden bed. Okay, so first I need to clear the area where we are going to install the trellis. We have wood chips down there and we're going to turn it into a vegetable garden. So we're going to move the wood chips out of the way and I'm just raking them off to the side for now. Um, and after that, we are going to dig 2
small holes so that we can partially bury the legs of the trellis. You're probably going to dig the hole about a foot deep and half a foot wide. You just need to be able to get the legs of the trellis in each hole. Um, and on this one, I actually dug just a wee bit too deep and had to put a bunch of dirt back in first. So you just got to play around with the space you have to figure out all that. But yeah, so just about a foot deep and about half a foot wide. We're just burying the posts a little bit, and we are also going to secure them with T-posts. Now we are going to place our first of the two T-posts. I'm using what's called a 3-pound sledgehammer. It has a short handle. It works pretty well to get the T-post in the ground with a little bit of effort. They do make specific T-post installers. I've never used one, so I don't know how much easier it is. And I've actually used a regular hammer that you would use for a nail before, and you can get it done, but it was quite a workout. After we have our first T-post installed, we are then going to measure to make sure we are putting our second T-post in at the 67 inches, since that's the width of our trellis, and then we can start hammering that second one in as well after we dig a second hole where the trellis beam is going to be. Once we have the second T-post in, we can double check our alignment, make sure everything's good. You can kind of wiggle the T-post in the ground a little bit if you need to. I had to make a couple more adjustments to this because I dug a little too deep on the one side, and also, as you can see, we have an older trellis that I made, I think, about a year ago, and that's our passion fruit vine on it. And we were trying to line up the height with it, and the ground is on a slight slope, so it took a little bit of um, redoing after getting that before we finalize clamping down the trellis on the T-posts. So that's why I'm making these little adjustments here. Once we have everything lined up how we want, we are going to go ahead and grab our 2 hose clamps and a flathead screwdriver. If you've never used a hose clamp before, it's like a metal band and you use a screwdriver to adjust it. You'll want to undo them, and then we are going to use those, we're going to undo them and then place them around the T-post and the vertical sides of the trellis. I like to put it just underneath the middle beam so that it kind of lays down on it a little bit for a little extra support. And what I recommend is when you're tightening it, use the screwdriver to tighten it back down as well as loosen it. You tighten it so that it is stable but not super tight, and then you do the other one. And then you can make little minor adjustments again if you are trying to line up the height like we were, so that it's nice and even. And then you can go ahead and tighten it down once you have it where you would like it to be. Once we've got everything clamped down, we're just gonna put the dirt back that we took out of the holes, make sure it's nice and smooth and even. And I think in this one, because we weren't quite ready to put the vegetables in yet, I put the wood chips back as well. And then after that, we are going to admire our handiwork. And congrats, you just made your first trellis. Take a closer look at the final product. You can see here the remesh is all on there and it's in the ground nice and even. There's a little bit of a gap between the bottom post. Here you can see where I like to put the hose clamp right below on either end. And this trellis is ready for plants to climb up it, and they are going to be really happy.
And that's how you build a trellis.
Well, here is our trellis. As you can see, we put 4 of them in. And these are all garden beds. I'm working on my drip line techniques.